So here was an interesting comment on my democracy video. Actually, it's one I actually can't believe that people really believe this kind of rubbish, but here we go, I'll refute it, because it's clear there are some people who do believe it. But before I start, let me say just one thing about some of the comments. I'm not bothering to respond to all of them. Some I'm simply blocking from the channel, and I have a good reason for doing this. I normally respond to everything. So if I think you're misinformed, I'll happily discuss with you and show you evidence of the misinformation by pointing to truth and facts. If you choose not to believe me, that's fine. You're entitled to an opinion. Even if it's wrong, I won't hold that against you. But I'm not going to get into hours of debates and discussions when you haven't accepted the first piece of evidence that I've offered you. You're either not misinformed at all. When you do that, you're part of the misinformation. And there's so much of it out there that I'm not going to waste my time, or any more of my time, arguing with people who keep doubling down and telling me I'm wrong. This following example is a case where I think the respondent actually might have been part of the misinformation rather than a victim of it, but I thought it was a good idea to respond to it anyway. FCL3294 said, quote, "In the PRC, you say that people get to vote for their local representative." I did. "An excellent example was the last Hong Kong election, where the CPC chose the only candidate on the ballot and all other would-be candidates were arrested." That's the end of quote. Now, where this kind of story comes from, I have no idea, but to allege it in a public forum is a sure sign of complete and total ignorance. Do these people asking this kind of question assume that I don't know this stuff or will not take a look and find out? Or are they so stupid that they haven't taken a look and found out? This allegation is absolutely not true. People do get arrested in Hong Kong for criminal or even treason or other activities, but there's not a single case of a candidate for LegCo, the Legislative Council of Hong Kong, being arrested in Hong Kong or anywhere else. If there is, perhaps someone can point me to it in the comments. I've not been able to find one, let alone the arrest of anyone who stands without, quote, Beijing's approval. There is, however, a very interesting criminal case. Two people who were registered as candidates in the lead up to the Hong Kong election, the one that was postponed during COVID. Now, what happened was really funny. Lam Siu Pan and Sum Sung Xiong, both 31 years old, jointly submitted a claim for about 68,000 Hong Kong dollars for mobile phones, notebooks, computers, and other digital products. Now, why was this suspicious? Simply put, there was a rumor that the election would be delayed. And there was also a rumor that any registered candidate would be reimbursed any of their expenses. Now, these two characters submitted an expense claim for 68,000 Hong Kong dollars just hours following the cancellation of the election. What they forgot to do was check the expense receipts, which had the times of the purchase, all of which were after the time of the cancellation of the election. Now, I'm not sure how good these guys would have been as legislators, but they're pretty poor as master criminals. They haven't been arrested, but warrants have been issued for their arrest. As for the comment that the CPC choose the only candidate, the only thing I can say to this is that it's complete and utter nonsense. The CPC does not select the candidates in either Hong Kong or the mainland. In Hong Kong, anyone who's over 21, a registered elector, who has resided in Hong Kong for more than 3 years preceding the election can stand for election. This is from the Hong Kong LegCo information, which I have actually linked. In the mainland, it's slightly different. According to Article 34 of the Constitution, and I quote here, "All citizens of the People's Republic of China who have reached the age of 18 regardless of ethnicity, race, gender, occupation, family background, religious belief, level of education, property status, or length of residence, shall have the right to vote and stand for election. Persons deprived of political rights in accordance with law shall be an exception. So if the law has said you can't stand, then you can't stand. In relation to Hong Kong, which is what we're talking about here, there is one caveat, and this is where misinformation feeds us a story that isn't true. The story is that people must be loyal to the CPC. Usually they say CCP. But this is absolutely not true. The oath that people take when they enter Hong Kong's Legislative Council asks them to be loyal to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. Nothing more. They must represent the people. They must adhere to the laws of the SAR, the Special Administrative Region, and acknowledge that it's part of China, which it is. In 2016, there was a famous case of some people, including some very famous names, now disgraced, some who have warrants after them, who refused to take the oath properly. They were disqualified from standing. I'm not sure if there's a country in the world anywhere which would allow a person to falsify the oath and still stand as an elected representative of the people. For sure, the USA, the UK, Australia, and every other English-speaking country that I know of is exactly the same as Hong Kong. Elected officials must swear to uphold the law of the country they live in. Right? Isn't that the same everywhere? And for the record, here is the oath. If you can find something that's disagreeable in this, you probably shouldn't be standing for election in the country where it stands. China. Quote, I swear that, being a member of the Legislative Council of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, I will uphold the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, bear allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, and serve the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region conscientiously, dutifully, in full accordance with the law, honestly and with integrity. Now, what's wrong with that? Now, several candidates have also been disqualified in Hong Kong. They were not arrested unless there was a crime for which they were suspected. But they are disqualified because they have called for independence. Now, this is in breach of basic law. Even the British government agrees, or they did when they signed the joint declaration, and they did again when they handed Hong Kong back to China in 1997, that Hong Kong is now part of China. Calling for independence is against the law, and people who do so can't stand for election. If you agree or disagree with that, it makes no difference. That is the law. And whilst in some places, like the USA, it's not illegal to call for secession, the last time it was tried ended up in a civil war, which killed approximately 620,000 people. And that is what China would like to avoid. So, as I finished my response to FCL 3249, I wrote to him or her, please don't come to my timeline with lies. I will refute one or two, and then I'll remove you if you persist. But persist it did. A few hours later, from the same account, this question was posted, which I actually thought was a good question, at least a good one for me to answer. And it asked, at Jerry's Take on China 799, that's me, please describe the difference between rule of law and rule by law. Well, my response was, the US seems to have a very different interpretation to me, but I'll try. Here goes. If I were to try, and please note this is only an opinion, not a legal definition, I'd say Rule of law is what China has. There are many laws. People follow them, mostly, and there is minimal crime or disruption to the community. Everyone knows where they stand, and I think that's a good thing. Now, if I look, for example, at Australia, where I last lived before China, there are many laws, and they are written, rewritten, and interpreted to suit the needs of the power brokers, the government. So, for instance, new laws recently written relate to foreign influence in China. Now, in China, I can say anything I like about my home countries, Australia or the UK or the USA. But, and this is really strange, the so-called democracies with free speech have all created laws to stop me doing something I can freely do in China. I honestly cannot legally write positive articles about China if I'm Australian, British or American, because they have all written laws related to foreign influence, which means that if I say anything positive about China, and I am paid by China to say it, and that's an if, I'm breaking the law, unless I've registered on a list that I've been paid how much I was paid as an influencer. Those laws in all three countries have been created to discourage people from making comments and statements which are positive about an adversarial country. China, interestingly, has no such laws. So if I'm published and paid for writing something positive about the UK, Australia, or the USA, there are no issues at all with that. But in Australia, the US, and the UK, I will have broken a law designed to prevent me from doing it. Interesting that China has no such laws, but why is this important? Because I think it defines the difference between rule of law and rule by law. Rule of law makes laws and has expectations that people will follow them. Rule by law creates laws in order to direct people along a path that they've chosen and manage them. Now, recently, Scott Ritter fell victim to the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It's nicknamed FARA. Now, you might have heard of it. Recently, there are several people in Australia currently awaiting court cases or even in prison after falling foul of foreign influence registration laws. So much for freedom of speech. Now, I hope that answers the question, but then, of course, there's always the difference between rules-based order and rule of law, but that's an entirely different story for another video. For now, I'll just say thanks once again for watching my take on China, and I hope for those of you who have concerns about Hong Kong, if you are still out there, you'll listen to this, you'll watch this, you'll check. And then when you do, you realize that I'm right and you were wrong. Thanks once again. See you next time. Bye for now.